Hello and welcome, guys, to Cyber Diaries episode number 25. We got another amazing guest in our studio, Hazel McPherson. First of all, welcome, Hazel.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm late.
No, it's okay. Thanks for, coming along and spending some time with us. I'm always fascinated to, learn about people's, careers. So first of all, I wanted to find out, was there a kind of a leading factor that led you to a career in tech, how you ended up working in tech?
I mean, some people might have already heard this journey, so I'll try and condense it a little bit.
Yeah.
I had absolutely no plan whatsoever to work in tech or with computers or cybersecurity. It was just not something I'd ever heard of.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was a real accident for me that I got into tech, and the moment that I realized that I was doing that was around 2001. And I was working for an organization in a sales support role,
Mhm.
and I was creating like PowerPoint presentations for the sales managers, and I was doing stuff with spreadsheets, and I quite enjoyed that. I was quite interested in using that technology, that application type stuff,
Yeah,
a bit more than the other people that were in that department. I mean, it
yeah,
wasn't anything like I did in the years after that,
yeah, yeah.
but it was that kind of excitement of, oh, I quite enjoy doing this, so I'll spend a bit more time doing it. And what was noticed then by the IT manager there was a kind of passion, a bit more interest, a
Yeah.
bit more than what the other people were doing. So he saw something in me, and he put me on a bunch of crystal reporting courses,
Mhm.
which absolutely sparked my interest in all things technology. I wanted to know more. I wanted to learn more. I went from that into SQL databases, into SQL reporting, into Oracle, into Access databases, kind of on the side, a little bit of VBA.
Yeah.
But then anything that I could get my hands on, I supported infrastructure, kind of networking, core infrastructure, networking and servers for maybe 5 or 6 years after that.
Mhm.
And anything that went with that, so Exchange, BlackBerry Enterprise Server, for anybody that remembers that.
Yeah.
I just got my hands on everything, absolutely everything in the early 2000s. And that was really what my sort of learning, and how I got into technology. And then I kind of pivoted into management a little bit, but management of systems rather than people initially.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of a long road of technologies until then I got to the point where I thought, cybersecurity is for me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I guess, leading on to that from there, you did a lot of, IT work and stuff like that. And obviously that led you to, I guess, we kind of call it nowadays, I guess, a pinnacle of cybersecurity, positions being a CISO. So I guess what I wanted to establish and I guess understand as well, I always, talk to people who are aspiring to be CISOs. And I always say, I don't think there is, a route that I could prescribe you to get into a
No.
CISO position because everyone went through a different route. So how did you ended up obviously eventually becoming a CISO and how was your journey into that?
Yeah, so I mean, everybody that asked me, let me start with this. Anybody that asked me that goes, "How did you get to CISO? How do I get there?" I will ask them, "Why do you want to be a CISO?" And the answer is
Yeah,
always different. And sometimes people don't have an answer,
yeah,
or kind of go away and go, "Oh, do I really want to be a CISO?" Because it is different. It's different everywhere. Every CISO is different. Every environment that a CISO is different.
yeah,
And I think that is just a byproduct of where we are in cyber at the moment. I don't think. I don't think the role is going anywhere anytime soon, but I do think it needs to evolve a lot, and maybe standardize a bit as well, because you might want a description for a CISO in financial services, which is where I work, completely different to a CISO in healthcare
yeah,
or government or whatever. That might be a different need. It absolutely will be a different need, but we haven't got that standardization at the moment. So anybody that really comes to me and goes, how do I get to be a CISO? The first question is why. The second question is what environment are you in at the moment, and do you want to stay in that environment? Because the route to CISO there may well be very different.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think, we always talk, and I think Jack Sharp recently posted about, the three types of a CISO. But I think, if you actually dig a bit deeper, there's probably many more of those. And I think, as you kind of alluded earlier, I think, there are a lot of people who came through technical route, but
Mhm.
now I think they're always shaping and it's changing. And I wanted just, I guess, to explore a bit, do you think that nowadays, in order to be a successful CISO, technical acumen is no longer enough? And do you think, like, we're often talking about, skills such as, communication, influence, you know, even I'm not, I don't think I'm very passionate about people to push people to do MBA and expensive courses. There are other ways to learn that business
Yep.
acumen. But do you think these skills are becoming a sort of integral part of CISO pathway?
I think that is a really big question, and I could talk about that for the next hour if you wanted me to. But
Yeah.
again, for me, it depends on your environment. So, do I think technical skills are useful being a CISO? Absolutely. That's the route I've come through.
Yeah.
It's allowed me to get to this position in quite a kind of fast evolving industry and environment. But now I'm in that position in a financial services organization, I don't think they are my strongest skills that are required to perform this role. And I think that if anybody coming into this role now, if I left, would not necessarily need those technical skills because I've got a really good team that
Mm.
have those technical skills, and that's kind of, for me, that is where the position of CISO should be. They're much more of a business leader, an influencer, a negotiator, an absolute sort of head of. Not necessarily board level. That's another conversation, but they
Yeah.
are the leader in that specialism, and we shouldn't really ignore what people call those soft skills, which I actually call power skills, because the ability to lead people is hard. The ability to motivate people to do things is hard. And let's face it, we're in an environment where they've got to work harder than a lot of other people at a level of quality that is better than a lot of other people. And they take a lot of flack for it because people don't understand what they're doing. It's not always
Yeah.
transparent. And then they've got that added pressure of being able to see the world through cyber eyes and look at not just what's happening next, but after that, and the different permutations of what could happen over here. What I call it catastrophization, but being able to then bring that back into an actionable plan and
Yeah.
something which is tangible that they can then improve with, but also being able to see that the most secure thing is not always the right thing. And it's that ability, and there's a lot of pressure that we put on ourselves as cyber people to be able to manage all of that. And I think when I think back to my sort of technical days when I was a network manager, or I was responsible for a server, or whatever it was,
Yeah.
you just got that one thing. You'd got that one thing that did a bunch of stuff, and people were either interested in its availability or lack of. You had to patch it, that was security. You had to upgrade it, that was features. You had to make sure the thing was available, but that was really it. And there was very little sort of what might happen if somebody gets access to it, because you didn't, as a purely technical person, you didn't really think about that. Is it available? Can people use it? So
Yeah.
this extra level of, is it available? Can people use it? Is it secure? Who's got on it? How can people get into it? What's next? What's attached to it? What could possibly go wrong with it? That's constant. And that constant noise and worry that cyber people have to go through adds a layer of pressure that you just don't see in my experience in other technical roles. So your original question, I
Yeah.
think it is helpful that people have a technical knowledge, but I don't think it's essential. I think
Yeah.
that the CISO role, absolutely, certainly in larger organizations or regulated organizations, needs to be much more of a business leader than a technical person.
Yeah, and I think, as you say, it's an important lesson, and I guess when you go towards leadership, to understand that, when you started out, I'm sure, most of the people have been in similar shoes where, you learn these technical skills and technical, tools, how to manage them, and you think, oh, I'm going to make everything super, super secure. And
Yeah.
that next level is of actually balancing that, allowing your staff to do their work and securing them, instead of, securing so much that work can't be done anymore. And I think
Yeah.
that's an
I mean,
important balancing
that was
lesson.
that was a really huge lesson that I had to learn about 8 years ago. I'd always done a bit of security stuff in my technical roles. I just didn't call it cyber.
Yeah.
But when I moved full time into my first role, which I'm still in now, which is my first full time role in security, that was my biggest learning from day one, because I was absolutely bubbling over with excitement and enthusiasm, and I was really surprised when everybody else wasn't. And why didn't we want to patch everything? And why didn't we want to make everything as secure as possible? And it took me a good year or so in that role to actually really understand that doing that wasn't always the best thing for the organization. And actually what we are there to do is support the organization and its strategic goals. I work in financial services. The end product doesn't really matter in terms of the grand scheme of things. I've come from healthcare where your end product is a human life, where it really does matter that you get these things right.
Yeah.
So again, it's about your environment.
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on a couple of things as well. So to me, I guess being a CISO, it's very important to understand, I guess, reporting and showcasing the work that you do in order to, you know, to get support. The one thing I'm a big believer that and I'll say this statement, and I would like to hear your thoughts. There obviously CISOs. I understand there are problems in our industry with, whether culture, whether it's reporting lines. But one thing I think sometimes CISOs, exaggerate is that they're not getting budgets and things like that. But to me, in a way, I always say, you need to be able to influence people to get that budget. And I
Yep.
always say, it's not the, you know, audience problem that they don't understand. It's the
No,
speaker's problem. So,
absolutely.
what's your view in terms of, I understand sometimes there are problems and it's constant problems, but I think sometimes it's our own fault not being able to influence the business to get that budget or that, or, whatever you need in order to achieve your
Yeah.
goals.
And I think that's the absolute crux of whether it is whether you're coming up through the ranks to CISO is technical or not. Because generally, and I am generalizing
Yeah.
here, pure technical people don't necessarily get involved with that negotiation with anybody, let alone the board. I don't know about other CISOs. I don't have a particular budget, but I do have access to funds should the need be there.
Yeah.
And the need is based on, risk essentially. So what kind of regulations have we got to fulfill? What kind of customer contracts have we got to fulfill? What's the right thing to do? Because we are a regulated financial services. So we've got this kind of, you must act with integrity all the time. That's one of the rules. So that's actually quite helpful for me because I'll utilize those things, not in the sense of, oh, I want the latest shiny thing to make my security life better, but actually there's a benchmark. And I think whatever industry you're in, you've got to find what your benchmark is because it won't be the most secure thing that you can do, but you have to reference something that means something to everybody else.
Yeah.
So if I'm going into, to talk to the sales director, I've got to speak their language. I've got to be excited about what excites them. I'm not got to go in and start talking about, my DLP because
Yeah.
why would he care?
Yeah, exactly.
It's almost it's a bit of a show sometimes, but it's got to be kind of authentic interest in all areas of the business, and that's where you start your negotiations with. You may or may not have a budget as a CISO. You may or may not report to, I don't know, the IT director who holds the budget in my case.
Yep.
But it's how you communicate that is the absolute crux of that. It's building your business case, and it is a business case. It's not a security case. It's a
Mm.
business case of how you achieve the strategic objectives for the business with security. And it is absolutely something that needs to be explained in that way, not in a way that is alien or technical or, you've got to put the effort in to learn how to speak to the audience that you're speaking to, or you're just
Yeah.
going to fail.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of lessons that I spoke with a couple of people. So I'm forgetting the name, but I've just recently met a lady from BBC who's a CISO of their business, and she said, and I think that lesson's gonna, again, it's resonate with loads of people. But she said, if you're managing technology as a CISO, you're gonna fail because you need to
Mm.
manage relationships. And the
Yeah,
similar thing when I spoke to Keith Price from National Highways, he always said, people talk about first, whatever, 60, 90 days plan. His 90-day plan was to meet people and gain support, provide, I guess, help to people, whatever it might be. But then you gain support when you are in need of
yeah.
support.
The
So I
the
think that's, an important lesson to learn.
Absolutely, the most important thing that I did and continue to have to do because you have to maintain these relationships is absorb myself into other people's worlds, build an environment, not a physical environment, but build a space where people can feel that it's trusted and they can come and talk to you about what may or may not be going wrong. And I'm quite fortunate in that we've got that kind of culture. now. With still work to be done, of course, but we've got that culture where people stick their hand up and they go, actually, I've just sent some data out where I shouldn't have, you know. And that's really important, that they feel safe doing that. They're not going to get, there might be a raised eyebrow on my part, like, why
Yeah.
did you do that? But still a safe environment where they feel okay to say those things at any level, because the speed in which people are able to admit things, because people will make mistakes. We're all human. I make mistakes, and the speed at which we're able to admit that means the difference between there being a big breach, a problem with the ICO, or we're able to contain it.
Yeah. I just picked up two words, and I think I just wanted to kind of get your views on it, because I think that these two things are very important. First of all, culture. So I recently made a post on LinkedIn that got, I think, 200,000 views about the culture, and I think it's very important. I think in my mind, unless you build a secure culture from the top down and bottom up as well,
Yeah,
you are very unlikely to achieve security goals. But then secondly, what you mentioned about allowing people to admit mistakes. So how do you think, about building and addressing the culture? Because one thing I sometimes don't agree when security leaders say that people are the biggest weakness in a business. If you build the right culture, I think people can be your biggest asset. And
absolutely.
that's about allowing them to make mistakes and
Yeah,
trust people instead of, I think whenever you start playing carrot and a stick and you start using too much of a stick, then the people can become your weakest link because
yeah,
you create a rotten culture in an organization.
absolutely. Yeah. So, um, I'll start with that question because I've already forgotten the first one.
Yeah.
Culture is really important. And how did I help? But so there was already a culture that I came into. It was already a good culture.
Mhm.
There were areas that needed improvement, and I don't think you can ever stop building on a good culture, good
Yeah.
security culture, because as soon as you stop doing it, it becomes complacent, and to use your word, becomes rotten. One of the things that we are mandated by our parent company that we have to do is that dreaded monthly phishing exercise,
Mhm.
where basically they are monitoring who clicks on the dodgy link. We can go and beat them with some more e-learning. I don't monitor that whatsoever. I monitor the speed in which people click to report it. So the difference between the first person who reports it to me as a dodgy link and the first person who clicks on it, that's my window of opportunity to respond to that incident.
Yeah.
And the bigger I can make that window, the more opportunity I've got to save us from a bigger incident. And the people that click the link to report it as phishing, I make big deal about that. So positive reinforcement, I just completely ignore, like, because the parent company will deal with the dodgy clickers. I'm
Yeah.
not interested in that. For our culture locally, I want to celebrate the people who are doing the good things, even if that means we get spam emails reported on a daily basis, hundreds of them. People hammer that phishing button, the suspicious email phishing button,
Yeah.
like it's a delete button, like it's, some kind of hate button that they can just take their rage out on. And my team would like, can we ask them to not do that? And no, I absolutely want them to do that, because whilst ever they're hammering that report button, it means more work for us, but it's also a bigger opportunity for us to respond when we do get hit with that legitimate phishing. And so that's the sort of thing that I'll monitor, and we'll make a big deal about it in Awareness Month. We've given out trophies for the top fisher
Yeah.
in the past, and just made a real big thing about how important it is, not just to report it to us, because we report it then to the local authorities in the UK. So it's part of a bigger picture. They
Yeah.
feel part of something more important, something that's bigger than just their team or our organization. We're helping the country. And in turn, that kind of sense of doing the right thing builds this positive culture, and they encourage their other team members to do it too.
Yeah.
So that's just one example of where we do positive reinforcement for people instead of beating them with the stick.
Yeah, and I think, that just kind of sums up, I guess, the lesson I always say to people, depending on what metrics and how you measure things, you will drive certain behaviors.
Yeah,
So if you measure bad things, you will, people will shy away from reporting things because they always think that it's a, reinforcement of bad behavior.
yeah,
So I think that's a very important lesson. Now, if we take a bit of a, I guess, switch, we often talk about, CISO roles. It's often, reported as a, people just going through revolving doors. They think, sort of average tenure, I guess, anywhere from 18 to 2 years.
Mhm.
Now you've been in one CISO role for a pretty lengthy time.
Yep.
Is there a specific thing that you think attributes to your longevity in one role?
Team. Absolute team. I mean, I couldn't do it without them. Absolutely couldn't do it without them. So picking the right people to be around you, and I know that I'm fortunate because I've got a team.
Mm.
Some CISOs are kind of landed in these positions, and I've seen your posts as well on LinkedIn about these unicorn type job descriptions.
Yeah.
You know, you can't do it on your own. If you're an organization and you're really looking for a CISO, that is a leader within your organization. That's somebody who's going to help you deliver things that are strategic, that add value, that are financially beneficial to your organization, and ultimately please your customers.
Yeah.
It is not somebody who's going to push the button on patching every month and make sure that we're compliant. You know, so having a team to do those things is really important, having the right kind of team, because the same environment that I hold for people being able to put their hand up and say, this is a problem, something's gone wrong, I've sent some information somewhere, I've pressed the wrong, but whatever it is, the same safe environment exists within our team.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to start building relationships or dealing with drama when we're in the middle of an incident. I want everybody to just be on the same page, and we do a lot of work to make sure that we can trust each other, because trust is the main thing that you need to have a positive culture. If you
Yeah.
don't trust the people that you're working with, there is no way that you want to go into an incident with them,
Yeah.
because you've not got time to second guess what they're thinking or worry about what's happening. You want them by your side, doing the things that you've exercised doing, and just getting on with it in a calm and collected and supportive way. So having a team is really important.
Yeah.
I can't I can't name anything else, because I'm really fortunate that I'm in that
Yeah.
environment, that I've got a good team. If you forced me to, I would, but team would still be right at the top.
Yeah. No, I perfectly understand, and I think you as sometimes again, just want to insert a bit of a, I guess, nugget and a knowledge for people who are on that path in terms of leadership. I think once you get to the leadership, team is going to be your biggest asset. But I think the one important lesson that you need to understand is you need to celebrate your team's wins publicly
Absolutely.
and punish them privately, or
Yes.
teach them privately if there is a teaching lesson. I
Yeah,
think
we
not
don't do
necessarily.
punishment unless it's for
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Do you think there is a specific like attributing factor that allows you to hire a highly successful team? Like, is there specific things that you look out for? Because we talked about broken job descriptions and some of the hiring practices in some organizations that are really broken. So what do you think allows you to get that successful team?
So again, just from my own experience, but what I look for in people is their passion. I don't necessarily focus on their experience or their education or anything like that. If they can have a conversation with me and articulate why they love being in a security type role, or why they want to get into it, or what transferable skills they've got to bring into it, you can see somebody's passion straight away. When they start talking about it, you can see it in their eyes, in their intonation, in their voice, in the way that they present themselves. So having a conversation with somebody about something that excites them, and one of my favorite interviews, probably not favorite, but one of my interview questions is, tell me about your computer that you've got at home. Tell me about your home setup.
Yeah,
And you can tell immediately the people that just go, oh, well, I haven't got anything. I've got the telly and that's about it. I haven't got time for anything else. Okay, you may still be a good SOC analyst, or you may still be good at the role that you're applying for, but you haven't got that degree of passion that I'd be looking for. Somebody who goes, oh, well, I used to have, and then I moved on to this, and I've currently got a server on order, and I've played about with this. Tell me all about that all day, every day, because I'm super excited to hear about that. But that's the difference in passion. That's not the be all and end all. But if you can talk with passion about the industry that we're working in, I
yeah,
know that you're not only going to be able to do it, I can teach you technical stuff, but you're going to be able to survive it. And that's really important. Everybody talks about burnout and the problems that come with it. But if you are passionate and you have a team that's supportive and a safe environment to be in, burnout shouldn't be a thing.
yeah. I always say that's exactly. I always say to me, my two top requirements from a person I hire is double A, attitude and aptitude.
Yeah.
you can teach everything else, but you can't teach someone the attitude they have and the
Yeah,
aptitude for learning that they're going to have.
yeah,
And I just picked up on another thing you mentioned, and I think that's very important thing where you talked about trust. I don't remember where there was one of the TED Talks or something like that, and there was a person who was discussing about the kind of people they want to hire, and they were talking about high trust and highly skilled people. And they said sometimes the problem you'll have is you might have a highly skilled person who's a bad apple. So you would rather have a less skilled person but higher trust person than vice versa. And I think that's an important,
yeah, yeah. And
uh,
trust is everything. Whatever kind of team you're in, even in my management team, we're all sort of heads of various divisions in technology. If there's no trust at that level, then why on earth would the teams below us trust us or each other?
yeah,
You've got to, it's a constant job to build that level of integrity and trust that goes with being able to be a high performing team.
yeah,
And that's my most important job, allowing my team to do their best job that they can do.
yeah. You are part of, one of the main persons behind B-Sides Bristol, Hacking Games, For Fox. How do you able to deliver so many things on so many different fronts? What allows you to perform at the highest level and support so many initiatives and so many different things?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot as well. My I suppose I'll give you the unserious answer, but there's some truth in it. I don't sleep a lot,
Mm,
so I get and the other side of it is I get really excited about it. I love giving back to the community. I'm part of a community now which I never had, growing up through technology. There is a technology community, but it is so different to the cyber community. So everything that I can give back to the people that come into this now, I want to be part of because it's so rewarding for me being able to see them come through as well.
yep,
And before Fox was something that I set up with some people that I trust
mm,
and that I respect. And we want to do various things under that brand that are badged as Tech for Good.
yep,
So that was why that was set up. B-Sides, purely selfish. I went to B-Sides in Bristol in 2019. It didn't come back because of COVID. I was like, where's B-Sides Bristol? Where is it coming back? Let's just get on with it and do it ourselves because
yep,
I want it back. So I got together with a good group of people and we bought it 2 years now and hopefully 3 years next year.
yep,
And this is, I guess, this is where I met you the first time. Was it
yep,
you were a speaker at B-Sides last year? Um, and so, there are various things. I get involved in mentoring through women's organizations. I've been, the hacking games is ramping up for the InfoSec Europe 2025. I'm part of the advisory board for that, this year now. So there's always something that's going on,
yep,
and it always comes back to how passionate I am about this industry and how I want to be part of writing that book of the big book of information security, that which we don't have at the moment. There's no very little standardization in our industry, and I want to be part of bringing that to a better place for the people that are coming through. I don't think I'll ever see it settle in my lifetime, my working lifetime, but knowing that I've formed it and been part of that is really important to me.
yeah. I think as you alluded, I think when I entered tech field again a number of years ago, I was really fascinated by the community spirit and support. And, you know, it was hard starting out because I went through sort of self-learning route, but the people I met on that journey, it was really like it really transformed me. And I think the one thing that was an everlasting thing was that people never ask for anything in return. They
No,
ask to pay it forward. And I think
yeah,
that was sort of a momentous thing that always, mentoring, it's a big thing, and helping people and guiding them. As I say, I never want someone to prescribe a specific route, but we can guide people and say what worked for us, and it's up to someone else to, I guess, find their path into that. We kind of touched a bit about, stress and burnout. Because I talked a bit, and I think I'm really, there was one of the CISO podcasts, I think, with Dr. Eric Cole, where he talked about, health, because I think, in order to maintain mental health, you have to, put yourself out there in terms of to be in your top physical health as well. What do you do, how do you manage stress, because I assume, as you say, we're spinning so many plates that, stress will creep in, and if you don't notice the signs, it might be too late.
yeah. So I am a rubbish example of physical health. I always have been. I freely admit that. I think that where I manage to keep a check on my mental health is by being authentic and open about it. You know, there are multiple routes that you can take care of yourself, and it doesn't have to be I'm in the gym at 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm running a marathon. You know, that if that works for you, that's great.
Yeah,
It doesn't work for me.
yeah,
But what does work for me is being able to be open about how I've struggled in the past, being able to share that with people, being authentic about it. I guess if you've read some of my posts on LinkedIn more recently, I've shared some of that as well, because
mhm,
of what I want to do is show people that it's okay. It's okay to fail. It's okay to struggle. And it isn't something that you should be ashamed of. Other people will be going through this. Off the back of one of those posts that I made about mental health and suicide, so many people contacted me directly and said that really resonated with me, but I'm not able to talk about it where I work because of my senior level or because of the culture within that organization.
yeah,
And again, I'm fortunate that I work in an organization where that isn't a problem for me, but if I did, I would leave because
yeah,
that's just breeding a culture that is unhealthy. You know, we have to talk about these things. If I broke my leg and couldn't come to work, I wouldn't be embarrassed about saying I'd broken my leg. You know, if I'm struggling with my mental health because of the workload, because of the stress, because whatever is going on at home in my personal life and that doesn't match with my work life, whatever it is, I shouldn't be embarrassed to say that I'm struggling right now. So
yeah. I think,
that's
yeah,
how I deal with it.
yeah. I think you're absolutely right, and I think that, it's kind of, I think mental health had a stigma attached to it for a number of years, and hopefully, there's so many, people like Holly and some of the other ladies
Yep.
doing the continuous talks, and it's proliferating every, I think, pretty much every event now there is someone presenting about that. So I think it's
Good.
important
Yeah.
to actually talk, because even sometimes about some of the mental health things, I guess unless you are knowledge or taught about things, sometimes you are not aware and not understanding how certain behaviors are shaping people. So I think it's very important to talk about these type of subjects.
But
Now,
even if you don't understand, just quickly, even if you don't understand it, you've never experienced it yourself, that's absolutely fine. But you've got to have the emotional intelligence as a leader or a manager to accept that if somebody else is saying that they're struggling with it, that's very real for them.
yeah,
And just because you haven't experienced it doesn't make it any less important. So
yeah,
having that level of emotional intelligence and being able to go out and ask the questions and say, I need some help understanding this so I can help my people is absolutely okay.
yeah, definitely. And I think just to kind of add an example here, the book I've read, The Smartest Person in the Room, it talks a lot about empathy, and some of these skills are very important to, sometimes you might not be aware, you say, but being trying to get into someone else's shoes and understand their perspective is very
Yeah,
important in
brilliant.
order to be able to empathize and help people. I guess just to wrap it up, cybersecurity is such a evolving and changing field, and it's rapidly, and it's hard to, sometimes you need to hold on for dear life how fast it's moving. So
Yep.
looking into the future, and it's pointless to predict 5-10 years, but I guess the next year or two, where do you think the leadership role is evolving, and what do we need to do in order to get ahead of the threats?
Again, a really big question, and I could talk about that for a long time. If you're specifically asking that in the sense of how we get ahead of the threats, um, my personal opinion with the CISO role, with the leadership position, is everything that I've just said. So you are a leader of the business. You need to be able to look at the posture of your organization, look at the horizon and the landscape and what's changing and how it's changing. Be able to speak to the technology managers, the people responsible for the tin and string, or if it's cloud that now, showing my age a bit,
Yeah,
and translate some of that or the risks of that into the language that the finance director speaks, the managing director speaks. If you've got stakeholders, you need to deliver that sort of message to them as well. You have to evolve into this almost like the mouthpiece of security on behalf of everybody else. You have to be able to continue your own learning journey so that you understand these things and you've got a good grasp of the risks of them.
yeah,
And you have to understand how you manage risk within your organization and then how you translate the risk that you see as a either technical or a cyber person into the impact for the business. It really doesn't matter what else is going on outside the world, political or otherwise, because the risks are very similar. Somebody's going to try and, exploit you in some way for financial gain.
Yep.
That's pretty much the risk. So if you can translate the technical terminology of how into business language and be able to translate that into the importance of why they should invest in the controls and measures that help you stop that, that's where your focus is, because nothing is changing. The technology will change, the speed in which we are breached will change, the frequency in which it happens will change, it'll only increase, but the way that you handle it is exactly the same, in my opinion.
Yep. And on that wonderful note, thank you very much, Hazel, for coming, and sharing your knowledge and, in your passion. And I think, it's always wonderful to hear, different perspective and learn from people. I think, it's not only for myself, but hopefully an audience just know how valuable some of these lessons are for us to be in the presence of, such a tremendous leader. So thank you very much, Hazel.
Thank you. Very generous of you. Thanks, Rose.
Thank you.